Hi, welcome back. So in the previous session, we were able to print some HTML on the browser window. But if you notice, this is not very useful. And the reason why is anything that I append right after this port 8080 is going to result in the same output. So let's say if I say hello, it is still the same. If I say welcome, hello, still the same. If I pass in any argument, for example, passing any query parameters, that is still the same. So it remains the same no matter what endpoint it is, no matter the number of query params, but also to the HTTP method being used. So when I hit this endpoint on a browser window like this, the request is by default get. But let me move to a different tool to show you how this behaves with different HTTP methods as well, such as post, put, delete, right? So for example, I've got the same endpoint here, and instead of get, I've got post method here. When I send the request, it shows me the same output here, and it doesn't change. Same with the put, right? And this is not what we want. As a web developer, you want to develop different web API endpoints, right? For example, slash login or slash welcome. And all of them individually should respond differently because that's the purpose. And not only that, each endpoint should have their own should behave differently for each respective HTTP method. So slash login should behave differently for get method or post method, right? Both of those methods and the responses should be different. And that's what we should be targeting eventually with web development, REST API web development, right? So now let's go back to the Visual VS Code. Now let's see how we can achieve that. Now there are a couple of ways to do that. And one of the easiest ways is by implementing a multiplexer. But before we start learning multiplexer, there's an easier way, or not an easier way, but I would say a different way, an alternative way of implementing that without having to use the multiplexer, and that's we'll start with that, and we'll gradually move up to multiplexer, and eventually we'll pick up some of the frameworks that are available, such as Gorilla or Eco, and we'll see how they implement it or how they make it easier, and then it's up to you to decide what actually fits the needs of your project. Sometimes you have a very simple function or a simple API to be developed. In that case, you don't have to go with a fancy framework. You can just use one of the simplest ways that are available in the standard library to have it implemented. But if you're going to be writing a very complex and very large code base, then you might want to consider implementing a framework across the team so that there is a standard in place and the code is also very lightweight and easy to write. Okay, so for now, let's see how I can have two endpoints here. So one is my welcome endpoint and the second is a login endpoint. So let's see how we can do that. Well, first of all, we will be needing this line, so we're not moving it away, but I'm removing this part. So this was my handler, and right now there is a default handler, and I don't want that. I want separate handlers. So I'm going to set it to nil. But if I set it to nil, then where do I set the handlers now? It set the URL and port, but where do I set the handlers? Well, you can set the handlers by using http handle func method. Okay, http handle func, and if you see, the handle func method has got three arguments. So the first one is the pattern. Pattern is a URL pattern that you want it to listen on. And then you got the handler function. So basically this is supposed to be a function that implements that is the same signature as the handler here. Okay, and we already got one such function here, which is this. And then well, actually that is it. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and I want to have two functions right now. So one is implementing Uh, one is meant for my login, another one is for my welcome. Okay, and this one is, I'll just say login. Okay, and please enter your username and password. And here I'll just say welcome. All right, and my first endpoint is, since it is login, I'm going to write slash login here, and the function is going to be my login. And I'm just gonna copy the same thing over here, and this time it's going to be slash welcome, and it's going to be my welcome. All right, and that's pretty much it. In fact, there's one other thing that I'll just add for the sake of simplicity. So when you are starting up your server, you'd want to write something like this in your standard output so that you know that your server has started up. It's kind of a convention. Everybody does that, so we might as well. Okay, listening on port 8080. Okay, and let's save it up. So a server is built, and if you go back here, well, if you see, it's showing me 404. But let me go back here and let's say login. And if you see that slash login is working, so I get login here, and please enter username and password. Okay, and if I do slash welcome, that is working as well. Okay, but let's see what happens when I do, let's say slash welcome, and let's say anything after that. It throws me 404, right? And that is exactly what is expected. Now, because this particular endpoint is applicable only for slash login, and this one is only for slash welcome, anything that you append to it is not a valid endpoint. Okay, but just in case if you want anything right after welcome to have the same response, then you might just want to add another slash here, just like this. Okay, so when I save this, and when I access the same page here right now, it's going to show me the output. Okay, it's not going to throw me a 404. So that means that it's ready to accept anything that I append to the word welcome here, pretty much anything. Okay, so it's going to give me the output. But if you remove this slash, then it doesn't do that. Okay, so this is something that you want to keep in mind, and this is exactly what you want to implement because you want your endpoints to be very specific. Okay, and in fact, right now, let's see what happens when I just don't have any URI here. Well, 404 as expected because slash is not defined. So just a minute, sorry. So just an empty slash is not defined. So there has to be something. And let's see if I say hello, that's also not defined. So there are only two endpoints that are defined. Anything apart from these two will result in a 404. Anything apart from precisely these two will result in 404. So that was our session today about implementing separate endpoints, and both of them are responding differently as we expected. Okay, they are not yet implementing different methods or different query parameters. That we'll see in the next session, and after that we'll actually start talking about multiplexers. Okay, so I'll see you in the next session then. Thank you.